and quoting the New Testament, like, oh, Jesus was born in Bethlehem, like Micah 5:2 says, isn't really going to cut it. Then Dr. Brand said that he has to come before the second temple destruction. I know the arguments Dr. Brand uses to make this claim. That's why I clearly said again and again in the opening statement, the servant has to come after the year 70 CE. So I'd like Dr. Brand to give us the evidence that it has to be, the person has to come to the second temple. And I guarantee you this is going to be, Dr. Brand's own words are going to be the refutation to him. He speaks about Abraham's seed. Torah says about Israel, and the land was promised to Israel. Actually, to Abraham, it was mentioned in Genesis chapter 15 that your descendants will have the Nile to the Euphrates. How do we know that's not speaking about Israel? Because the book of Joshua says that all the lands that God promised them, they had received. And if Dr. Brown wants the actual text, I'll quote it in the next rebuttals. Moreover, in the Torah, God tells the Israelites that the land of Edom you lot cannot take, that's for Esau, and the land of Moab is for the Moabites. So how could they be the ones that the Nile and the Euphrates is promised to if they're already being told, number one, they can't take this land, they can't take that land, and number two, in the book of Joshua, they're told all the promises of land that I promised you has been given to you. Moreover, factually, it was the Ishmaelites who took the land from the Nile to the Euphrates with the coming of Prophet Muhammad on whom be peace. So Dr. Brand says that the Jews prayed towards Jerusalem. The Muslims did that in the early years, but the ancient house that was built was the Kaaba, so it's gone back to there. As simple as Jerusalem still holy in Islam, but Makkah is the place that we face. Now, Deuteronomy chapter 18, Dr. Brand said I added to the Bible, but he didn't specifically say where. Every single word I said when I broke down the text is implied in the text. So Dr. Brand should give me a specific example. Dr. Brand says that Deuteronomy says, Mikerevka, which means within you, is used 11 times in the book of Deuteronomy. So that means he must be an Israelite. What Dr. Brand is doing is, yeah, I'll stand up because I don't need a laptop at the moment. What Dr. Brand is doing is he's appealing to the Masoretic text of Deuteronomy chapter 18, verse number 15, that has been expanded on to have the phrase, from within you of your brothers. The Septuagint lacks those words. The Qumran scrolls lack them words. Acts chapter 3, when it quotes the same word, lacks them words. Acts chapter 7, when it quotes them words, lacks them words. And even in the Masoretic text, 3 verses later, when the actual the words of God are spoken, the words from within you are not mentioned. Moreover, scholars say that was expanded in the text to make it look like it must be an Israelite by blood, and I've got the quotes here anyway. Moreover, Dr. Bryan himself doesn't know, with all due respect, that there's a difference in the book of Deuteronomy. Deuteronomy chapter 18, verse number 15, Israel is personified as a single person. So when it's speaking about the brother of the single person Israel, it's speaking about another nation. All the texts you cited, which literally say within you, are speaking about brothers within the tribe of Israel. And I'll give you an example from Deuteronomy chapter 18 itself. Levi is spoken of twice in the same chapter, I think in verse number 2 and verse number 6. In verse number 2 is speaking about the brothers of the tribe of Levi, meaning the other Israelite tribes. Whereas in verse 6 is speaking about the brothers within the tribe of Levi. Now Dr. Brown brought up Deuteronomy chapter 24 about brothers and foreigners. But because he's mixed up the fact that there's a difference between brothers of the nation and brothers within the nation, he's created a contradiction. Why? Because the Edomites in Deuteronomy chapter 2 and Deuteronomy chapter 23 are called the brothers of Israel. Now, if Deuteronomy 24 speaks about brothers and foreigners, are the Edomites classed as within the brothers, or are they classed as the foreigners? If you say they're classed as within the brothers, then so are the Ishmaelites and the Midianites and all the other sons of Abraham. If you say that they're classed as the foreigners, then you yourself are admitting that this is speaking about brothers within the nation, not brothers of the nation. So you contradicted yourself by appealing to Deuteronomy chapter 24. He says the prophet must be like me and he quoted Deuteronomy chapter 34, verse number 10, about speaking face to face and miracles. The first point is that, like me, in the context of Deuteronomy 18, is about being a law-giving mediator. How do we know this? Because Moses gave this prophecy while he was mediating the covenant of the Torah at Sinai. And that was a unique thing about him, that he was giving a law. He was a lawgiver. Moreover, this prophet is referred to as a messenger of the covenant in Isaiah chapter 42, Malachi chapter 3. Moreover, Isaiah chapter 42 tells you that he will be a lawgiver. As far as face-to-face and miracles, Prophet Muhammad on whom be peace did do miracles. And I know the people like to quote the Quran to think it denies the miracles, and that I'm waiting for that. And Prophet Muhammad on whom be peace did speak to God face-to-face on the night of Al-Isra wal-Miraj, which, even though Moses spoke to God directly on quite a few occasions, that one occasion where Prophet Muhammad spoke to God directly is on a higher level, because he was taken to the highest parts of the heavens and spoke to God directly. So it's quality, not quantity. So did Muhammad perform miracles? I'll wait for Dr. Brand to quote some verses from the Quran. And Dr. Brand said that Jesus performed a miracle on Moses' level. I challenge Dr. Brand, give me the greatest miracle that Jesus gave that's on the level of Moses. Moreover, Deuteronomy chapter 34, verse number 10, even in the Masoretic text, is a prophetic past tense which refers to the future as well. I'll quote rabbis and academic scholars who mention that it rules out future prophets as well, being from Israel. So let's see. Dr. Bryan mentions that Acts chapter 3, verse 22, Peter applies Deuteronomy 18 to Moses. Actually, on a plain reading, Peter says that Jesus is in heaven now, and he must await there until all things are restored. For verily Moses said, and then he quotes Deuteronomy 18. On a plain reading, Peter's saying that things must be restored by the fulfillment of Deuteronomy 18 before Jesus can return. Now, if Dr. Bryan tries to say that this is not the case, then he's created a problem, as Howard M. Teeple mentions in his book, The Mosaic Eschatological Prophet, that this would mean that the first coming of Jesus wasn't the fulfillment of Deuteronomy 18, that he has to come back and fulfill it. But then I ask, how is he going to come back and be like Moses? Because apparently he's coming back in his full glory as God, and he's going to kill those who do not want him to be king, who we know, according to the best commentators of Christianity, the Jews who rejected him in Luke chapter 19, verse 27, he's going to come back to kill all of them. So how is that like Moses? Then he says, the servant of the Lord can't be Muhammad, because in Isaiah 53, the servant dies. Actually, Isaiah chapter 40 to 43 to 53 is speaking about two servants. It's speaking about the suffering servant, which is Israel, and then it's talking about a deliverer. And I'll give these passages. Moreover, even the Jews and many scholars don't take Isaiah 53 as speaking of the same person as Isaiah 42. And even the Targum interprets it in a way of the suffering Israel and a deliverer who they say is the Messiah, because that's there from Isaiah 40 to 53. Did he have a primary mission to Israel? Read Surah 2, ayah number 40. He came to renew the covenant with Israel. The servant would go to China. Well, guess what? The Muslims in the 7th century reached from the border of China to France. And wherever the servant's mission goes, the primary people who should come into the knowledge of God are the Ishmaelites. So who brought the Ishmaelites from idol worship? It was the Muslims. And Dr. Bryan admits this in his book, which I can quote. So Haggai, him that proves nothing. Yeah, the name of Prophet Muhammad proves nothing, but for Yeshua, he has to speak about somebody else and say that's a type for Jesus, because he can't find a direct prophecy. So a guy, a high priest, who has a mother and a father, by the way, according to the same text, because he's called the son of, I forgot his father's name, but he's the son of, his name is a foreshadowing of Jesus, because you can't quote something directly like I just did. And as far as Song of Songs, Dr. Brand tries to play it down, but the Jews had a consensus, the Christians had a consensus that this is speaking about the allegorical meaning, the history of Israel and the Messiah, and so are the Christians. So all Dr. Bryan is doing is mocking all these scholars. Why? Because he knows the minute he admits it's a prophecy, the Muslims will have a field day. And he misrepresented us on the Paraclete. None of us, and I didn't say it's the Holy Spirit. I said the Paraclete is not the Holy Spirit. So everything that everyone was laughing about the Holy Spirit, this and that, is just a joke's on you, actually, with all due respect.
Thank you very much for that, Zakir.